I just want to let you know we're going to wait a few minutes because the weather is not cooperating with us just yet. Talk among yourselves. Talk among yourselves. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm Patty Brennan. I'm the director of the National Library of Medicine, and I'm very happy to welcome you today to this very exciting day. We're having this morning a conversation with NIH grantees Dr. Stephanie Strathy and her husband, Dr. Thomas Patterson. It's a wonderful story they're here to tell us about today that actually began with a very frightening and life-threatening event. While traveling in Egypt, Dr. Patterson became quite ill, surprisingly and complexly ill, and because of the efforts of Dr. Strathy, she was able to locate a long unused but well-recognized approach to treating what looked initially like a case of severe food poisoning, but actually was a problem, a huge infection with antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Dr. Strathy and Dr. Patterson are both NIH grantees. They've been supported by the Fogarty Center. They've been supported by NIAID, NIDA, as well as the NIMH. I'm happy to welcome today several of my colleagues from across the NIH campus, including Dr. Roger Glass from the Fogarty Institute, my NIH and NLM colleagues, and particularly our PubMed colleagues, who are kind of the star of the show. But I'm going to turn this. They'll be giving you a bit of their story, which has been reported in a book, and we learned today will be made into a movie, we hear. And if you were watching the Today Show while you were waiting for the snow to clear, you've already seen them once today, but they're here in the flesh. They will be taking questions afterwards, so please be ready for a good conversation. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time.
So I'll start off by denying that I'm George Clooney. But hopefully he'll play me naturally. Actually, the story began on a vacation in 2015, November. We were in Egypt, having a great time. I felt wonderful, no problems. Climbed down a pyramid, hiked around. Everything was right as rain. Had a wonderful meal, up on the deck of a cruise ship on the Nile. Everything was fantastic. Went to bed. About an hour later, I woke up, and I was throwing up. Food poisoning, of course. That's what I imagined. And I kept throwing up. Got worse and worse. Next day, we were travelers, intrepid travelers, and so we brought along our Cipro and dropped a pill. I kept throwing up, couldn't hold it down, couldn't hold down water, nothing. Pain started to radiate from my back. I started complaining about that. Steph, over my protests, called a doctor to the ship. They pumped me up with some fluid, gave me some more antibiotics, said, you'll be fine tomorrow, no problem. You'll be able to see the Valley of the Kings. Little did I know, it might be true. I might be one of the mummies of the future. So at that point, they took me to a very rudimentary clinic. That was in itself scary, and I think one of the things that you learn from travel like this is that language is an important factor, and when you can't speak Arabic, and you have a doctor but no nursing staff or anybody that can communicate with you, it's incredibly frightening, and being in a situation that's very low resources is incredibly frightening. But I soon was beginning to hallucinate and have a lot of problems. So I think at this point I'll turn it over to Steph to really pick up where we were, because for the next 9 months that I spent in the hospital, I was in and out of coma. I had 7 cases of septic shock, and they gave up on me in the end, but I got ahead of myself. So Steph, what did you do?
Well, as you can imagine, when you're seen as a global health expert and all of a sudden you're getting a crash course in global illness, life became pretty scary. And we were in this clinic in Luxor, Egypt, where the Valley of the Kings was supposed to be the highlight of our trip the next day. There was no hospital in Luxor, and this clinic was doing the best they could. They diagnosed pancreatitis, which is an inflammation of the pancreas. And I thought, okay, well, now that we know what this is, then we can treat it. Well, by that time, I was on the phone to our colleagues back at home in San Diego, Dr. Chip Schooley, who is a well-known NIAID researcher, NIAID-funded researcher, that is, who works with me at UC San Diego. He said, pancreatitis is likely to be only one part of the problem here. We have to find out what caused it, and it can be really serious. So try to get him out of there, and let's see if we can get him medevac somewhere where he can get treated. And so that was my first challenge, was to get in touch with our travel insurance company. That was one of the first little lessons. When you're going to a lower or middle income country, travel insurance is always a good idea. So $38 between the two of us got us 7 ambulances and 2 Learjets to get him home. And but we couldn't get him home right away. He was too ill. So he was first medevac to Germany, where they did a CT scan, and he was in this CT equipment for over an hour. And when they came to speak to me afterwards, they were very somber, and they were fully gloved and gowned and had a face mask on. And the German doctor said, he has a giant pseudocyst in his abdomen. It's the size of a small football. And he picked up a flask and he showed me this brown, murky, putrid fluid. And he said, if this cyst had just formed, this would be clear fluid, but it's clearly been there for quite some time, because something is growing inside this cyst. And we need to find out what it is. We're culturing it, and we'll know within a day or two. I've asked them to put a rush on it. But since you've come from Egypt, where there's a lot of multi-drug resistant organisms, we're treating this as if it could be, a superbug. So at this point, I was back on the phone to my colleague Chip Schooley, and he said, look, let's just hope it's not an escape pathogen. And so I am an infectious disease epidemiologist, but I've been really laser focused on HIV and substance abuse and the intersection of that. So I was really out of touch with a lot of my microbiology, which is about 30 years old. So the first thing I went to do was to PubMed, and I put escape in there, and I spelled escape with a C, like I thought, and PubMed corrected me and said, "Did you mean escape with a K?" And I went, "Oh, and what's that?" Well, it turns out the letters in escape, ESKAPE, each of those stands for a different superbug that is a serious threat to human health. And Tom's turned out to be the A, Acinetobacter baumannii. It's taken me a couple of years to learn how to pronounce it properly. But that organism is very common among veterans from the Middle East, and so its nickname is Arachibacter. And I started to read up on this and realized that we could be in quite a bit of trouble. And so they were, the German doctors had the antimicrobial resistance testing done to determine whether or not this bug was going to be sensitive to any antibiotics. And it was only partially sensitive to 3 right off the bat. There was 15 R's on this antibiogram that came back. And that was very scary already. It was partially sensitive to colistin and partially sensitive to meropenem, and the other antibiotic he was allergic to. So that was scary because very quickly I realized that my husband is becoming kind of somewhat of a poster child for this dystopian future of the superbug crisis. So we got Tom stabilized, got him medevaced home to San Diego, and all of the antimicrobial resistance testing was repeated, and by that time it was now resistant to those last few antibiotics. And the doctors, took a look at a paper that I, again, found in PubMed that I sent back to Dr. Schooley, and it said it was a paper from the Middle East about the same kind of organism that Tom had within a pancreatic pseudocyst, which is what he had. And they said there's 2 choices. One is surgery to remove the cyst, and the other is through interventional radiology, where they put catheters in the abdomen to siphon out the fluid. So by this time, I'm not an MD, but through PubMed, I was becoming more educated first on all of the superbug epidemiology that I missed over the last couple of decades, and also what kind of avenues of treatment that might be in store for Tom. And so when I got back home, Dr. Schooley said, look, this paper you found hit the nail on the head. There are these 2 avenues. We would like to operate, but the surgeons are saying that he's too weak, and plus, this is now resistant to